Hi folks, it is Thibaut Van Dam here with another YouTube video, and for those of you who are not familiar with my channel, I am a DIY singer-songwriter and guitar tutor based in Southeast London. Today I'm very excited to be continuing my series about practical guitar and also music theory on my channel. Specifically, we're going to be learning about scale degrees and also Roman numeral theory, more so the Roman numeral system, just as a way of getting ready for the future videos that I'll be making about functional harmony and harmonizing the major scale. These are really important ideas if you're interested in songwriting, and these systems are going to get used constantly as we go through the forthcoming topics. So if this sounds interesting to you, please definitely consider subscribing to the channel, consider liking this video, and thank you to everyone that does subscribe. It really does mean a lot. It's why I'm here right now making this video. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump in. I've got a few things to say, and it's a little bit tedious, but that's okay because I've got to do this, and this way, hopefully, after watching this video, you will be ready for future videos. I recommend that if you have it available, a notebook is going to be handy, as well as 3 different colored pens if you've got them. If not, that's cool too. So as a forward to this, the ideas behind having scale degrees and also using Roman numerals to depict scale degrees is an important one. And it comes from the idea that basically when we talk about notes within a major scale, that each note bears a different significance within a major scale. Because when we talk about something like C major, each note in C major relates back to the note C differently. For example, if we talk about the note B in the scale of C major, it means something in particular. In this case, the space between the note B and the note C is a major 7th interval. That is what it is. And it sounds very specific, and I'll demonstrate this in a moment. But when you think about the scale degree of the note, say B, within the scale of B, well, it's unison. It's the same note. It's what we could call the tonic. It has a totally different intervallic function. So this idea of intervallic function and how it corresponds to each individual note within a specific scale is a very important thing to take note of. And so because of this, it's important that you have a strong understanding of some fundamental theory that I have already done videos about, including the chromatic scale, which you absolutely must know. It's absolutely imperative that you know what the major scale is, but we will be going over it again in this video if you haven't. And also you should know what intervals are, so that way you have a good idea of this idea of the value of the space between any 2 notes and the impression it can give. So if that sounds good and you're ready for this, then let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to do is, because we're going to be using the major scale to identify scale degrees to begin with anyway, although every scale has scale degrees, even minor scale and so on. We'll just start with major scale because that's the scale we've looked at so far. Let's just talk about what that major scale is. So I'm going to start by writing major scale. I'm going to use red because I like to use red for major, but you use whatever you want. Now I'll just give the forward. Again, even though I've repeated this before in lots of my previous lessons, this is something that just never changes, which is that the major scale is a formula of whole steps and half steps that basically is played in a specific order, and that the result gives us the impression of something sounding major. And it's important to take note of each and every one of those words I've chosen, which is the sequence. The order of the notes is important. And alongside that, it's also worth pointing out that the formula is important, and more important in this case than the notes themselves. This is because of the universal and fundamental sort of practices of music theory that we have. This is the idea of equal temperament, that each note has equal opportunity to every other note. And so if you want to make a major scale out of E, F, F sharp, G, whatever, you can do it actually, and you will be able to make a major scale out of any of those notes, and that they're of equal value. And so this is an important thing to really take on board, because when we go through this major scale, it's important to realize that the idea of scale degrees applies sort of extraneously to the notes themselves, and detaching our understanding of scale degrees in terms of how they function with one another versus how they function within a specific scale related to the notes. The names of the notes are not as important as the actual operation of the scale degrees and the intervals of those scale degrees. So I hope that makes sense, but let's try to keep that in mind if we can. So what is our major scale formula? Well, we start with that root note, and then we go up a whole step, which is the space of 2 frets or 2 semitones. We go up another whole step, then a half step, which is the space of one semitone or one fret. And then we go up a whole step, another whole step, and then finally one last whole step. And then we are a half step away from the following starting point. So if we start on a note like say A, if we follow that formula, the last note that we will hear is also A. It will be separated by an octave, and that is our major scale formula. Root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve for a scale, because again, you can apply this to any note in the chromatic scale. Let's make a major scale out of the note C. So we start with our root, and that is C. We go up a whole step, which is the note D. A whole step from D is E. Half step from E is F. Whole step from F is G. Whole step from G is A. Whole step from A is B. And then finally, a half step from B brings us back to our starting note, which is the note C. So you should have something like this written down. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Very cool. And so now let's talk about what scale degrees are. It's a really simple, ridiculous idea, but basically the idea is that we are going to assign numbers to each of the notes in the scale and in the order that they appear. So the first note in the C major scale, the note C, is our first scale degree. The second note in the C major scale is the note D, and that is our second scale degree. The third note in the C major scale is E, and that is our third scale degree. And then F is our fourth, G is our fifth, A is our sixth, B is our seventh, and that is the last note within the scale. The last scale degree is B. And then at that point, because the scale will repeat, just like the chromatic scale will repeat in perpetuum, so will this. It would just go C, D, E, F, G. It would just basically repeat. And so we'd go back to 1. Then we'd have D as being our second scale degree again, E being our third, F being our fourth, and G being our fifth, and so on. And so the real important thing to take note of relative to the C major scale are these following scale degrees. This is how we do this. We assign, so when we go through this scale, this is going to be our scale degree 1, scale degree 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's why I emphasize this idea of the half step at the very end, only to bring us back to that first note, because this is not technically a new scale degree. It ends on that whole step. So that is our final scale degree. We have C being 1, D2, E3, God focus, E3, F4, G5, A6, and then B7. Great, those are our scale degrees, and that is the system to it. Now, I want to demonstrate the significance of identifying each of these different scale degrees. Why do we need to distinguish them? Well, if we think in terms of C and C major, each of those notes sounds different when you relate them back to C. So for instance, if I play the note D on top of the note C as a harmony, that's a major second interval. When you play the note E, though, on top of the note C, that's a major third interval. It has a totally different feeling to it. When you play the note F on top of the note C, even still different. And then G on top of C. So as a harmony between G and C. And then A, C. And then finally B. B over C is a major seventh interval. So the intervallic spaces between each of these notes, how they relate to C specifically, varies. So of course, it would make sense then, therefore, that each of those notes has a different scale degree, a different function, musically speaking. Great. So now we've talked about the significance of scale degrees and how they relate to the notes and the intervals, why they're important to know. But we run into an issue, see, because if we use these symbols for the scale degrees, the number 1 that we are so, familiar with, that number 1 and 2 and so on, if we use those symbols for those numbers, we run into a problem where we are at a loss to convey the ideas of major and minor. That is why we have the Roman numeral system in play, so that we are able to represent major and minor, basically. And so now I'm going to explain the Roman numeral system and how it actually works. So central to the Roman numeral system, and actually we'll just write that down, Roman numeral system. Okay, central to the Roman numeral system are symbols. We have symbols that are not the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, because we don't have lowercase versions of this. We don't have a lowercase 1, lowercase 2, 3. Because those symbols don't exist, we have to find a way to do that. So it's important to take note of that. The first thing is we have ways to convey major and minor through uppercase and lowercase. Uppercase, in this case, uppercase means major. And I'm going to use blue to represent minor. So lowercase equals minor. So this is the first thing we can take note of about the Roman numeral system. This is why we use it at all. Because later when we associate chords with each of the scale degrees, which is what we'll do when we harmonize the major scale, we'll find that there are major chords and minor chords in a certain order that associate with each scale degree. And we'll need a way to represent which chords are major and minor whilst simultaneously representing the scale degree we were talking about. So that's the first thing we have to know about this, that we're going to use uppercase for major, lowercase for minor. We also have symbols. We have new symbols that we're going to use. So we're not going to use the numbers 1, 2, 3 as we know them. We're going to use these other symbols. So the two symbols we'll see include kind of a line. Now, because I said we have uppercase and lowercase, we have the uppercase letter I, right? And then we also have the lowercase letter I. And again, to represent minor, and I'm only using the colors for emphasis on major and minor variations, we are going to use uppercase I, which is the letter we know, actually, the letter I, to represent major 1. We're going to use the lowercase letter I to represent minor 1. So I'll show you what that looks like. This is a symbol that we have. Uppercase I equals major 1. It's major because it's uppercase. Lowercase I equals minor 1, and it's minor because it's lowercase. So we got to keep that in mind. Another symbol that we'll run into is the symbol V, and it looks like the letter V actually. We have an uppercase V, and the way we represent uppercase V in this case is with a line on top and a line below. I'll show you in a sec. And then we also have a lowercase v, and that's represented with just the V without the line on top and line below. So the uppercase V represents major 5. The lowercase v represents minor 5. And all the same rules apply. So the idea here is that this is major 5 because it is uppercase, right? And this is minor 5 because it is lowercase. Alrighty. So now, how do these symbols interact to convey the numbers? So it works a little bit like a tally system. And so if you aren't familiar with the tally system, it is a basic rudimentary approach to addition. We add the lines together. So if we want to represent the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I'll also just point out as an aside, there are only 7 scale degrees in most scales. And so because of that, or in other scales you might find less, and I don't think there are any with more, but you could in theory have more. Actually, yeah, you could have up to 12 before it became chromatic. And so the idea is, because at least with the major scale, we only have 7 scale degrees, we only need to be able to accommodate for 7 possible Roman numerals in this case. And so these two symbols are satisfactory for this use. We only need the I, and we only need the V to represent these things together. So I'll just show you what each of these numbers, the symbols that we know, how they translate to the Roman numerals. So 1 is just the if it's major, it's capital 1. 2 is just 2 lines, both capital, and they're tied together by the same line. And I'll show you what that looks like actually, because this is kind of how it starts to become cohesive. So 1 equals kind of just capital I, like that. 2 is 2 lines, but they're tied together by the same line. So we'll use that line actually to represent that. 3 is 3 lines in a row. Now when we get to 4, instead of representing 4, the way we do it is we represent it with 1 before the 5, which I know sounds nuts, but it's basically 1 before 5, or 5 minus 1 equals 4. Great. It's really kind of a strange idea, but this is how, like, societies were built, thinking like, how do we represent the number 4? 1 before 5. That'll do. So 4 is 1 before the 5, 1 before 5, or 5 minus 1 is 4. That's how you can think about it. And then when we get to 5, it is just the V. When it comes to 6, we actually move the I, the extra number or the symbol. So we have V with the I after in this case. That tells us that it's 1 after 5 or 5 plus 1. And that equals 6. See? So we've got 1 after 5 or 5 plus 1 is 6. So that's how we represent it with this symbol here, VI, as opposed to IV. And 7 works in that very similar way where it's VII. So 2 after the 5, which is 5 plus 2 or 7. And I'm not going to write it down because I just don't want to take up any more time. Now, if you needed to convey one of the scale degrees as being minor in character, instead of using the capital, you would use the lowercase version. So instead of having, and I'll do them all the way on this edge here, but basically we would have lowercase I, then lowercase 2 i's, lowercase 3 i's, then IV, but lowercase, then V, then VI, then VII. I wonder how they talked about this. Would they say VII to each other? They're arguing, you owe me VII. That'd be funny. Okay, so here we go. These are the symbols we have for the minor variations. So if we knew we were conveying a chord that was minor, but it was the first scale degree, we'd use the lowercase I. If it was the second scale degree, we use the lowercase II. Third scale degree, lowercase 3 i's, then IV, V, VI, VII. All the symbols are actually the same, but they're just the uppercase and lowercase variations that we saw here. Lowercase for minor, and then uppercase for major. Okay, now the final thing I need to say about Roman numeral theory, the last thing I need to say here about Roman numeral theory, I've used 2 different colors of pen to help emphasize and distinguish between majorness and minorness. But the beauty of this system is that just by virtue of the uppercase and lowercase use, we don't actually need that. For example, if you wanted to represent major 1 or minor 2 or major 3, or let's say minor 4, this is what it would actually look like. Now I've used a third color pen. This is the only reason I needed a third color pen. That this is neither, you wouldn't see it as being major or minor just because of the color. You could actually look at it and say it's capital, it's major. It's 1 because it's the symbol 1. It's lowercase, it's minor, but it's 2 because it's the symbol II. Capital 3 is major 3, lowercase 4 is minor 4. So this is how the system works, and that just about does it for this video. I know that it was maybe not the most exciting of videos, but I think it's an important thing to learn leading into the idea of harmonizing the major scale for sure, because we'll be talking about that in the next video, and I'll probably talk about it again then too, and then also basically getting to functional harmony, the idea of a major 1 chord or a minor 2 chord. This becomes important. So it's something worth considering. And so I hope you found this video informative and helpful. If you did, please consider giving the video a like. Please consider subscribing to the channel. It's the best way to stay in the loop. If you need help understanding this topic, you're welcome to reach out for a free first lesson. I offer a free first lesson using the link in the description below. And thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you at the next one. Ciao for now.